So I saw a really interesting Reddit post recently, and it was in the real estate advice subreddit. And the question was, hello, my grandma passed away this Monday and left her real estate to me. I'm trying to understand if she owns the whole duplex or half. Back in 1993, she bought it with my uncle. Both names are on the warranty deed. She quitclaimed it to her son, then back to herself, so my uncle would not get the whole property when she passed. My gran also filed a transfer on death to me. The duplex has two addresses, but one tax parcel and real estate tax form. But the property title only has my grandma's name on it, as well as a mortgage on the house, only in her name. I'm very confused about if she owns half or the whole duplex. I've checked with the county for any newer warranty deeds, but there is nothing. So this is a really interesting question. First thing that we want to tackle is how can a property be listed as two separate units? And in Massachusetts, there's really only two ways to do this. The first is if there's a validly created condo, that has to be created per the requirements of the statute, which would mean that there's a master deed, there's a trust, there are things that have to be done, and that would allow you to create essentially common area and then each separate unit. The other way is if you had two properties that are abutting each other, the structure straddles the property line, and there's a wall on the property line. We call that a party wall. Pretty uncommon in most of the state, but we do see it in Boston from time to time. So the other question we have to tackle is how do people actually own real estate jointly? And there's two ways that are relevant here. The first way is as tenants in common, meaning that each owner, if they pass away, their share of the property would go to their heirs or devisees under their will. The other way is something called joint tenants or a joint tenancy. And that would mean that the survivor would inherit the entirety of the property. Back in 93, when they purchased it, it could have been either of those. And it sounds like it was probably a joint tenancy, and grandma was trying to sever it or stop that joint tenancy from having a right of survivorship. So she deeded her share to what we would call a straw. And the reason we do this is grandma can't actually transfer the deed to herself without an intervening step. There are reasons that you have to be really careful about straws, but kind of outside of the scope of this video. So it went to a son, went back to grandma, and now she put a transfer on death on the property. And that essentially means that for her half of the property, she has effectively severed the joint tenancy and now has earmarked it for the grandchild. The problem is she can't actually sign for her son, the uncle in this case, who was a co-owner, unless there was a validly exercised power of attorney, which would actually need to include specific gifting authority in order to make that deed valid. So in this case, what probably happened is she transferred her half of the property to a straw. It was transferred back to her. Then she established a transfer on death deed, leaving it to her grandchild, meaning that the uncle probably does own half this property, and grandma's half is now owned by the grandchild. So the real lesson in all this is you don't need to understand exactly how real estate title transfers. You don't need to understand the ins and outs and the legalese, but you do need to think, I should probably talk to a lawyer to make sure that this is being set up correctly. Because when people are actually transferring deeds and potentially drafting them themselves, that's where we have these funky situations where we've essentially split ownership and we don't have the outcome that grandma actually intended. So if you have questions about your property or a family member might have an issue with property like this, that's something we'd love to help with. It's usually a pretty inexpensive and easy fix, but really saves a lot of time and hassle on the back end. And we want to come up with a plan to avoid these types of situations. So if you do have a question, feel free to leave a comment below. Contact my office. Our information is on our website. You can submit a request or even give us a call. And I want to thank you for watching the video. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.